Carter Walton staggered out of the dimly lit bar before dawn's pale glow could soften the edges of his worst memory. The disastrous wedding scandal that had shredded reputations and nearly destroyed the Forrester legacy he was sworn to protect. He could still taste the bitter tang of humiliation on his tongue, replaying in his mind every whispered rumor, every accusing glance cast in the vaulted halls of Forrester Creations. The boardroom had once felt like solid ground under his feet, but in the weeks since the ceremony's fallout, it had become a quaking stage of shifting allegiances, sharp whispers, and clandestine meetings. Ridge was silent, Steffi more distant than ever, and Quinn had offered him a thin smile that promised loyalty even as her eyes danced with unspoken calculation. His father's voice echoed in his blood. A Forrester must endure, must fight. But the weight of expectation and the sting of betrayal coiled tight around his heart, and he had found solace in the bottom of a glass, each swallow an attempt to dull the relentless ache of trust eroded and power slipping like sand through his fingers. He shuffled toward his car, his vision blurred, each street lamp haloed in a haze of alcohol and despair. The engine roared to life beneath him, a beast he could barely tame. Every bump in the road sent shards of memory spiking through his skull. The flash of cameras at the ceremony, the venom-laced accusations in the press, the cold resolve of executives edging him out of strategic meetings. Tonight he would feel nothing. He pressed harder on the accelerator, the needle trembling closer to the red zone, as if his very desperation dared the engine to protest. His knuckles whitened around the wheel when a sudden curve came too fast. Time slowed as the headlights caught the barricade at the intersection. Bright stripes of warning cut across his path like a judge's gavel. He jerked the wheel in a panicked arc, but gravity and speed conspired against him. Metal groaned. Glass shattered. A scream tore free from his lips, swallowed immediately by the crunch of steel and the bright, all-consuming flare of impact. Moments later, or was it hours, he awoke to a haze of white walls and antiseptic scent. Machines hummed at his bedside, measuring every faltering beat of his heart, every shallow breath that struggled past cracked ribs. Life felt tethered to wires and beeping monitors, each blink of a nurse's overhead light a fragment of unwelcome reality. He tried to move, but a wave of agony crashed over him, pulling him back into unconsciousness before he could discern friend from foe in the sterile gloom. Outside his room, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Some hurried with purpose, others slowed by caution. The whispers began anew. Questions about negligence, about a man too drunk to find the brake, about insurance liabilities. But underneath the official chatter, a darker current flowed. Was this mere recklessness, a tragic consequence of too many drinks and too much stress? Or had someone plotted his downfall with far greater cunning, lacing his drink, sabotaging his brakes, ensuring that Carter Walton would lie broken and bloodied while power shifted elsewhere in the Forrester hierarchy? Detective Alvarez arrived, his expression schooled into professional detachment even as his eyes flickered with something more, curiosity, skepticism, perhaps a hint of foreboding. He cornered Quinn in the CEO's sparsely furnished office, pressing for details about the events leading up to the crash, the meeting with Carter earlier that evening, the sudden coldness in his voice, the half-finished glass of scotch by the bar. She answered smoothly, presenting herself as the concerned ally, but her carefully controlled composure only fueled the detective's suspicion. Meanwhile, Ridge steered a different line of inquiry, poring over security footage from the intersection, reviewing maintenance records for Carter's vintage Mustang, interviewing valet attendants who'd watched him stumble out of the bar. Each person brought new revelations: the bar's last delivery of premium liquor, the mechanic who'd noticed odd wear on the brake lines, the bartender who'd wondered why Carter refused the usual water chaser. On social media, the public spectacle revived. Fans speculated wildly, dividing into camps that saw him as a broken hero undone by personal demons or a victim of corporate sabotage too twisted for daytime television. Inside his hospital room, Carter drifted between consciousness and fevered dreams. In one vision, he stood alone on a great chessboard, each square occupied by a trusted friend or a scheming rival moving pieces without his consent. Steffi's face shimmered with regret, Thomas's with guilt, and Bill's with triumph. Beyond the board, the Forrester Towers stretched like monoliths in a storm-tossed city. He reached out to seize a knight, to reclaim the game, but the pieces dissolved into dust. When he opened his eyes, Dr. Patel hovered with guarded optimism, warning of internal injuries and the long road to recovery ahead. Carter's jaw clenched against pain as adrenaline flared. He would fight to walk again, to speak again, to stand in the boardroom and confront those who'd try to bury him under a landslide of rumors and half-truths. But first, he had to survive the night. And beyond his bedside door, the gears of investigation ground ever tighter, promising to expose friend and foe alike in a ruthless pursuit of answers. At the weekly board meeting called in crisis mode, the Forrester family, lined up like generals at a war table, debated the future leadership. Quinn pledged to serve as interim CEO, her confidence masking the undercurrents of ambition. Rich hesitated, torn between loyalty to his family legacy and frustration at Carter's absence, whispering to Steffi that perhaps they'd finally weathered the storm he'd unleashed on them all. Thomas watched from the sidelines, his own aspirations rekindled by the void at the top. Even Katie crossed her arms, her concerns tangled between personal affection and professional prudence. Outside the conference room, a private investigation firm nosed through every shred of evidence, a grainy video of the bar's lone door camera, the toxicology report that would soon reveal whether Carter's bloodstream held more than alcohol, the maintenance logs that hinted at a grease-stained wrench, left behind by a mysterious consultant. The question haunted every conversation. Was this an accident steeped in self-destruction, or a meticulously orchestrated move by someone desperate to seize the reins of one of America's most storied fashion dynasties? Back in his hospital bed, Carter's dreams grew darker. He saw a faceless figure slip through the shadows of the parking lot, kneeling by his Mustang, prying at the brake lines with practiced hands. He heard laughter, cold, triumphant, drifting on the night air as he stumbled unknowingly to his doom. When he awoke again, sweat-soaked and gasping, he realized the stakes. This was no longer just about his personal redemption. The Forrester empire teetered on the brink of chaos, its future hinging on the outcome of his struggle between life and death. And somewhere in that storm of ambition, envy and fear, a puppeteer held the strings, ready to pull them at the moment of maximum effect. Carter vowed, even as pain radiated through every limb, that if he survived, he would uncover the architect of his destruction. He would expose the conspirator who believed a dead CEO would secure their claim to power. He would reclaim his name, his honor, and the legacy he had almost lost in a haze of regret and scotch. The boardroom drama, the warring families, the hidden agendas all would come to light, and justice, however delayed, would be served. Hope Logan burst into Carter's hospital room clutching a bouquet of lilies, her heart soaring at the news that he'd finally awakened from his coma. She'd raced through the sterile corridors, visions of Carter's fierce smile propelling her forward, convinced that this was the turning point not only for Carter's recovery but for their love, tested as it had been by scandal and danger. But the moment she flung open the door, the sight that greeted her shattered every ounce of hope. Carter lay utterly still, his eyelids closed as if in deep sleep, and worst of all, the breathing tube that had kept him alive for weeks lay coiled uselessly on the crisp white sheets beside him. No ventilator hummed. No Ford drip glistened. For a suspended second, time froze. The lilies trembled in her grasp, her chest tightened with panic, and the only sound was the hollow echo of her own ragged breathing. Someone had removed Carter's life support while Hope was away. The question slammed into her like a sledgehammer. How long had he been without oxygen? How many minutes had his lungs starved? She raced to the nurse's station, voice trembling as she demanded to know what had happened, only to be met with confusion and then blind panic as the nursing staff confirmed that Carter's monitors had stopped hours ago. The code blue alarm had been triggered and then silenced, inexplicably, by someone with access. Security tapes should have recorded it all. But the feed for Carter's room that night ended abruptly at 2:17 a.m., 15 minutes before Carter flatlined. Hope stumbled back toward the room, her mind spinning. Who could have done this? The hospital was supposed to be safe, its halls monitored. Yet someone had bypassed protocols, pulled the tube, and left Carter to die. Fury and grief roiled through her. She snapped at the detective assigned to the case, demanding answers. Who would want him dead? Who had motive? Detective Alvarez's face tightened. Hope, he said gently, steering her to a chair. This isn't random. Someone wanted Carter gone. And I intend to find out who. But as whispers spread through the Forrester clan, suspicion began to swirl, especially around Thomas Forrester. His obsession with Hope was no secret. He had watched Carter's accident from the sidelines, waited for his rival to fall. He had even comforted Hope at the hospital, offering a shoulder to cry on, all the while scheming. Could he have slipped into Carter's room under cover of darkness? Tampered with the ventilator line? Stolen the tube? Thomas had the knowledge of the hospital layout. He'd volunteered for the charitable gala held in the building lobby days earlier, and the technical savvy, courtesy of those countless hours he'd spent hacking Forrester Creations systems to steal design documents. And he had the motive. Remove Carter, gain Hope's gratitude, and slide into the void at Forrester, claiming power and affection both. Yet there were other dark possibilities. Quinn, desperate to maintain her interim CEO position, had much to lose if Carter returned to health. Ridge, torn by loyalty and frustration, might have contemplated drastic measures to end the chaos. Even Bill Spencer, ever predatory in his own right, had eyed Carter's seat on the board with greed. The list of suspects was long. And each had means to slip into the hospital. Hope refused to concede. She combed through Carter's personal effects, scouring his phone for messages that might hint at premonitions of danger. She scoured security footage herself, demanding raw camera files, until an unedited backup revealed a shadowy figure lingering outside Carter's door long after midnight. The figure wore a dark coat and a baseball cap pulled low, a disguise, but one that carried traces of a floral scent. Hope recognized the fragrance, Thomas's signature cologne, Midnight Orchid. Armed with this clue, Detective Alvarez brought Thomas in for questioning. He denied everything, his voice smooth and rehearsed. He'd gone to the hospital earlier that evening to check on Carter, yes, but had left before dinner. He claimed to have spent the night in his penthouse at the Forrester estate, alone. His alibi rested on text messages sent at 1:45 a.m. But cell tower logs placed his phone near the hospital 10 minutes later. Confronted with the data, his eyes flickered with something unreadable. Fear? Guilt? Defiance? He refused to explain the discrepancy. As Thomas's denials fractured, Hope realized that Carter's true fate balanced on a knife's edge. Was Thomas truly the hand behind the sabotage, or merely a red herring in a deeper conspiracy? And if Thomas was innocent, who else moved under cover of night, wielding the power to kill? And the desire to watch Carter take his last breath? Hope pressed on, refusing to let grief and rage overtake her. She vowed to stand guard at Carter's bedside to ensure that if someone tried again, they would be caught in the act. She enlisted Steffi to help, and together they traced every barge of hospital inventory, ventilator parts, surgical tools, even the master key that opened any door in the facility. Each lead pointed back to one name, Thomas Forrester, or someone with access to his signature. Now, hope awaited the final piece of evidence, the autopsy of the ventilator line and the fingerprint analysis on the removed tube. When the lab results arrived, they would tell the true story, whether the killer had gloved hands or a fingerprint to finger. And as she sat by Carter's side, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead, she whispered her promise, "Whoever you are, wherever you hide, justice will find you. I will see you hang for this." Thus the battle lines were drawn. In the halls of Forrester Creations and beneath the pristine floors of the hospital, a war of secrets and lies raged on. Hope, driven by love and vengeance, and Detective Alvarez, driven by duty and truth, prepared to unmask the culprit. And somewhere, in the silent darkness where the crime had been committed, the real mastermind watched and waited to see if they'd been clever enough to get away with murder.